everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Transformation in a Day. Thank you for attending. Got two of my colleagues who are introduced in a moment. You're hearing from two companies today, Zyzy and Fluent. We've been working together about 2 years, working with organisations, transforming digitally, trying to use digital technologies more effectively. And what we're hoping to do today is share some of our insights in terms of what's worked well for organisations, and probably more importantly, what things can become blockers, and around that, the sort of things you can start to consider to predict those blockers and, more importantly, remove them. So we'll talk about those during the session. So my name's Andrew Hawkins. I'm head of sales at Zyzy. I've worked with public sector organisations around about 10 years now, predominantly in central and local government, a lot of time in local government in the past. I've certainly worked with a lot of organisations. I think everybody in the public sector is going through digital transformation in some shape or form. And I've worked with a lot of organisations who have started that journey. Some think they probably completed it, but in reality, because it's sort of almost endless. So I'll be talking a little bit during the day, some of the things I've seen. Anger.
Hi, my name is Angela Pillay. I'm the CEO and founder at Zyzy. I've also been working in public sector for a long time, working in, back in the day it was called e-channel shift, and now we're working on digital transformation programs across various central government departments at the moment.
Hi there, my name is Paul Lakin. I'm founder and head of design at Fluent Interaction. My background is in design and research, and we've worked with a lot of public sector and private sector organisations across all aspects of digital transformation, really, but focusing predominantly on the end user experience. So making sure that the transformation is in the user's interests and aligns to the business needs as well.
Just a bit of background on Zyzy. So we've been around for about 10 years now, just over 10 years, specializing in end-to-end digital services, so helping organizations transform. We started off focusing initially on using open source software to use an agile delivery methods to really help organizations transform. And we've now been using cloud technologies to really accelerate how we use both open source software to assemble solutions, but also using cloud platforms and technologies to accelerate the time to value. And in tangent with that, we've built expertise in cybersecurity and data governance, especially with the upcoming GDPR regulations. That's been one of our key focuses, and that's some of our key strengths.
Okay. So a little bit about Fluent. We've been around now for about 15 years. We specialize in designing digital user experience. So that's anything with a digital interface. We help make sure that the design of that and the experience that the end user has is not only appropriate, but it's meaningful, it's intuitive, and it delivers what the business wants. So the way that we do that is we have a mix of creative designers and behavioral scientists and psychologists. We do a lot of user research, and we practice what we call evidence-based design. So evidence-based design is around making sure that what is designed really does work for the end user and proving that. So rather than sort of traditionally, just the creative side of it, it's really about making sure that there's that evidence trail and that anything that is designed is demonstrable and is proven to work normally before it goes live, and then we test and optimize during live as well.
Okay. A bit of housekeeping as well. Hopefully you can hear us and, even more importantly, see the slides. If you do have any problems with that, do contact us through the chat channel in the interface, and we'll do our best to improve things, but hopefully everybody can hear and see well. We're also going to run a couple of polls during this webinar. The first one we're running now, just a bit of feedback from you in terms of how you currently describe your digital transformation journey. If you can complete that, hopefully we'll get a little bit of insight in terms of where the audience here today is on that transformation journey. We'll run a second poll a little bit later as well.
It's also worth pointing out that if you do have any questions, by all means fire them across in the chat box. We have provisioned some time towards the end of this. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can, and if questions go unanswered, then we'll try and pick that up after the webinar as well.
Okay. Top level view at the moment.
So we're just going to give you a few more minutes to vote. I'm going to close the poll very soon.
Okay. Generally speaking, I think the vote at the moment shows the majority have started digital transformation, which isn't a surprise. I think I'd be surprised if any organisation wasn't. But I think most people are saying they're finding it a struggle to gain traction. Okay, so not surprising. I mean, my personal experience has been it's sometimes easy to get digital transformation moving in the first instance. The challenge is to get the whole programme moving forward. It's often years 2, 3 and 4 where you hit the blockers, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I mean, 2 aspects to this webinar. One, we are talking about service we offer, so you will be hearing about what we could do to you, help you with in theory, but also along the way, we want to give you some takeaways. So regardless of whether you want to discuss things with us in the future, hopefully we'll just give you some insight in terms of the sort of things you can do to, as I say, particularly importantly, try and predict and plan for blockers ahead. And as I say, we go through that as we go through the rest of the slides. So digital transformation, as said, I mean, it's no surprise from the poll finding as well. I think in not just public sector, every organisation is digitally transforming. Certainly in the industry, I think everybody's a little bit tired of the phrase to some extent, transformation. I mean, fundamentally, everybody's just trying to use or optimise the use of new technologies to improve their business. I think what differs is the outcomes people are looking for. Clearly in the public sector, huge agenda around efficiency and cost saving. In private sector, it could be around business survival and competitive behaviour. So, but the outcomes can be different, but the willingness and desire to use digital technology in the business is absolutely viewed as important, and certainly sits on most board agendas. And I think something we'll come back during this webinar is who needs to be engaged in these programs, and not just engaged at the beginning, but engaged throughout their entire longevity, which can be many, many years clearly. So I think everybody knows it's important, and it is just really making businesses digital. We always talk about a business becoming digital, not necessarily transforming, just adopting digital as the way that business is done internally and externally. The bottom line, that's hard. I think it's funny when I go to events, a lot of the examples that are talked about are new startups, businesses that have perhaps got one product. And in many ways, they've got the advantage. They're starting from a greenfield position, and 2, they've got a quite simplistic thing they need to do. One service line, one proposition, that kind of thing. In the public sector, I know we've got people from a lot of local government organisations. I know you sit on many, many applications, a complex legacy and history of how organisations come together, new policy initiatives happening continually that changes that. It's a complex environment, and it just makes transforming around new tech, new digital capabilities fundamentally difficult. So it is hard, it is difficult, and I think it's recognising that throughout an organisation that's trying to do this is probably critical, and then taking the action to make sure you kind of push through. And the consequence of getting it wrong can be high. Certainly one programme we've worked on in central government has reached the point where it's almost close to being cancelled. You get projects that are restarted and reset. From a private sector perspective, it can mean a business going bust. So the consequence of getting it wrong can be substantial in any sector. In the public sector, again, a council I've been working with over the years, they had huge transformation programs based on a business case that at the end of the day proved to be not rigorous enough. And so the savings and the efficiencies they were hoping to find weren't delivered by the programs. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong, and the consequences can be phenomenally high, both from an individual point of view, but more importantly, the organisation. So it's important to try and get it right, and it's important, we think, to do as much as you can at the very outset to try and understand what are the steps you can take to, as far as possible, predict and alleviate the risks and blockers you might hit. One thing we do see is paralysis. And I think it's interesting, again, being a supplier working into an organisation, often we will see an organisation becoming paralysed and they don't necessarily see it themselves. It can be as simple, particularly in a large organisation or even a smaller local authority, with a kind of a siloed structure, one particular group of people thinking everything's going fantastically well, another group either not knowing at all what's going on or viewing it as an absolute disaster or whatever. So organisational paralysis can certainly result quite quickly from getting things wrong, and often you don't know you're paralysed as an organisation until too late, frankly. Often it's the outsider who can see things before you see it yourself internally. The results of that, as I've already said to some extent, projects get delayed. I think that happens all the time. An awful lot of digital projects start with good intent, start with real pace, and then get bogged down. Many a time I've seen people at that stage kind of walk away from projects. You have that kind of rush of enthusiasm at the beginning, and then 6 months, a year down the road, you see people kind of moving off the project and those sort of things. Costs escalate. Particularly, as Angus said, we work a lot in agile projects. Great way of delivering a project if you manage it and go in with the right expectations, but also a fantastic way to see huge cost spiralling if you're not careful. And that touches, I think, on all digital projects. You can suck things in. One thing I've seen particularly is people start to introduce new tech without understanding the tech they've already got. Again, a council we've been working with has ended up with many new systems on top of many old systems, and in their words they said effectively we're probably using every one at 25% of its potential, and in the process paying an awful lot of license fees, a lot of support fees, and just a lot of cost in terms of training and managing it. And so they're going through an exercise now of actually consolidating their tech, and in many ways that was driven by the fact that they went digital, bring in the new tech without considering the impact on the existing technology and ongoing costs and support costs, the big picture, the full return on investment and those sort of things. So costs can dramatically escalate, and not always in the places that seem obvious at the outset of the programme. And finally, as I've already said, I mean, the ultimate outcome can be a project getting cancelled, and the impact of that, particularly in the private sector, could be a whole business not surviving. So huge ramifications of that. So paralysis can become a major issue around these sorts of transformation projects.
Okay, so we're going to run another quick poll. So this one is multiple choice, so answer as many as you feel are relevant. This one is around what are the blockers, really? What challenges have you faced with digital transformation so far?
A few more moments to vote. Okay, so I'm about to close the poll. Just give me a few more seconds.
I'll read these out. I mean, again, possibly no surprise in the end of the day. I mean, the majority of you picked a lot of the options. So lack of knowledge and skills, 50% of you roughly have identified that. Lack of resources, 70%. I think probably one of the challenges in the public sector is getting the right resources behind these things. So again, that may be no surprise. Lack of senior stakeholder backing, 63%. We'll come back to that one, but I think it's quite a critical one. Complexity of current IT, 60%. I'm surprised that's not higher to some extent. And organisation is not customer centric, 43%. So that's the lower one.
Okay. So in order to try and address this, we thought, what can we do? Because often with these kind of projects, the big challenge is the enormity of the challenge. Things, as Andrew said, things take a really long time to get going. When things are going, they often struggle. And it's almost that, how do you climb a mountain where you take the first step, really. So when we're looking at something that might take a really long time, our answer to that is, well, how short a time could we do it in? So often what we see on projects is conversations or, ideas and solutions happen through a conversation of documentation and ad hoc meetings, and that means that they take quite a long time. So it may take weeks, it may take months, where PowerPoint files are being shared, ideas are being shared, conversations are happening ad hoc. People aren't necessarily always in the room at one in the right sort of time and place together. And our answer to this is, how quickly could we help you accelerate your digital transformation? And we believe we can do it in a day. Now that may sound a bit fancy, but we've done this. We've seen real results. We've seen projects accelerate. In fact, one of our clients has said, actually, what you've managed to do in a day is what we've taken to do in 6 months by sharing PowerPoint slides. And the secret to that is not to try and do too much, but to try and focus and get everyone in a room for a single day, the right stakeholders, the right people, everyone who needs a voice on the project or a representative of those people on the project, with the right skills and experience. So we bring along a range of different people with a range of different skills and experience, from tech, creative, from customer insight, etc. And we run a one-day event. And we'll talk a little bit of detail in a while about what that event actually looks like. But we believe in that one day, what we can do is accelerate your project by weeks, if not months. So we can get you to take that leap and actually get things moving, whether it's the start of the project or whether actually your project is stagnated and we need something that comes along and actually just gets it moving again. And that's what Digital Transformation a Day aims to do.
One of the key things, and I think we've touched on it a little bit already, is absolutely getting the right people engaged in the project, in the program at the beginning. And also, in fairness, the key part is keeping them engaged. Again, a point we'll probably come back to repeatedly, but it's keeping that engagement. But it is representation from all relevant parts of the business, and relevance the key word. In a local authority, where I've seen digital transformation move at pace, it's typically been where the chief exec takes a lead part in it. Again, that's typically some of the smaller authorities I work with. But again, a chief exec who's engaged and drives it and is engaged with their teams makes a fundamental difference from what I've seen personally. One at the bottom, finance, often forgotten. Again, I worked on a project 2-3 years ago. It was a cloud transformation project, but underpinned the digital transformation. And it was all fantastic until finance had a look at it, probably a little bit later than they should have done. And suddenly all sorts of things came out of the woodwork, existing contract costs, the costs of people, hidden costs in the business that aren't necessarily visible unless you really know what you're doing. And so it might surprise you to have finance involved at the beginning, but absolutely in these sort of programs where, particularly in the public sector, financial goals are often one of the key outputs, getting them involved in the beginning, I think is absolutely critical. The IT team, make sure they are involved in all aspects. Again, thinking about local authorities in particular, complex organisations, complex IT. Often you might have an outsourced partner. Get the right people involved in those teams so they can start to think about the impact about what you're talking about, and so you can start to plan ahead. Again, we're talking about it as we go through the webinar, but it's fairly typical in a digital program to start at great speed, but suddenly at some point come across an IT system or an integration that you need or a particular data set that suddenly becomes a huge issue because it becomes a complicated thing. It's not being budgeted for, you haven't got the skills for it, and it completely slows down and potentially stops the program. So get IT involved early, get their buy-in. The digital team, that's probably the obvious one. If you have a digital team, everybody should be involved there. Clearly the service lines, and it should be the leadership in those service lines, and possibly cross-service lines. Again, talking to councils, one thing I've seen repeatedly is if in driving a digital project in a particular service line, often what isn't looked for is synergy of other services. So if we're creating a kind of a sort of relationship management thing for a particular thing you're offering to your citizens, there may be synergy with other services that ultimately, if you identify it early enough, could provide savings and potentially much better services. So involve relevant service lines, but think out the box on that one. And as I've emphasised, probably management and leadership, they need to be engaged at the outset, get their buy-in, get their support, and get them driving the agenda. So it's a full team. So driving the service that we offer, one of the fundamentals we look for is organisations to get together the right team for us covering all those aspects and get them commit to be both as part of the service that we provide, but more importantly, to be part of the overall project delivery and program. So right people's critical, and then secondly, right skills and experience. And this is part of the stuff that during the process you can kind of sanity check and verify you've got, but understand fundamentally why you're going through the change. It may sound an absolutely basic and obvious thing, but sometimes you can get so caught up in the digital, the vision, the possibilities, that you can lose sight of some of the fundamental things you're trying to achieve. So make sure they're absolutely clear, the vision for the business. Understand where you are today, have a really pragmatic and rigorous view of your current progress, and the internal skills. Have you got the skills to deliver? I worked at the council 2-3 years ago again, where they put a lot of energy into building a new website. The thing they hadn't done is they had done no budgeting for future development of that website, and they also had done no work at all to understand what skills they would need to develop that website moving forward. So they were left in a situation where they were trying to get contractors, which brings in extra cost, which was restricting what they could do, and they really had a complete disintegration of pace in developing new digital services because of that. So it is really have a solid, practical view of what you've got internally. Current IT and digital estate, get that on the table. Again, you could spend years, some of your organisations probably looking at your IT estate, what you have, but from a top level view, get an understanding of the key systems, their limitations, restrictions, dependencies, and that kind of thing. Experience with the users, that probably goes without saying. That's probably the fundamental reason we're all doing this, to drive new digital services for them. And as I said before, really have a good, clear view of the financial constraints and make sure you have a rigorous business case. The example I mentioned before, and I've seen it elsewhere, is it's very easy to miss significant costs on the business if you're not careful. So do involve finance, and it's one of those things that go through iterations on it. Make sure you keep revisiting it and keep challenging it, because it will bite you hard if you get something wrong. I mean, obviously we can talk about millions potentially having impact. So as part of this, as part of the event, we make sure that you have got the right skills and experience and that you're assessing those.
So it all hinges around a one-day event. We all know that work will expand to fill the time available. If we focus, if we get everyone in the right place for a one-day event, it's actually quite amazing what we can achieve. And that's really important. Now, it's worth saying that this isn't just a one-day event. There's some pre-work to agree the scope, and that's really, really important to make sure that when we have senior stakeholders all in a room for a full day, that we make the most of that day. So there's a lot of work in agreeing what's the scope, pre-event research, making sure everyone is really focused on the day when they arrive. But on the actual day, what we're trying to do is say, right, this is our challenge. Today, we're all going to solve it. I've personally been in lots of meetings, especially from a creative perspective, where it might be a 2-hour meeting, and actually the last sort of 20 minutes of that 2-hour meeting, you just start to get some ideas going. Ideas are flowing, we're starting to come up with some creative work. That's where, think the energy is really starting to happen. 20 minutes later, what happens? The meeting ends, everyone's got prior engagements they need to disperse, and that gets lost. The idea of the one-day event is to not lose that, is to get everyone in the room with nothing else that they need to do on that day and sort of crack through that and get to the answer. So what that means is you're not then, everyone goes away, 2 weeks later you come back, loads of things have happened, some people come back and have thought about it in one direction, some people have thought about it in a different way, and then you have to just start the process again. If we battle through that on the day and get tangible results, then that solves that problem. What that means is that we can, by the end of the day, we can make sure that we know exactly what the next steps are. We have a plan for how you take it forward. We don't just leave you with, here's a solution to the problem, but you don't know what to do next. You can then work out how to get the stakeholder engagement that you need. We all have a shared vision. We'll have looked at what might be the problems or the challenges that you face when taking the solution out and making it actually happen. And really importantly, what we get out of that day is we get something that's tangible that takes ideas out of people's heads and makes it real, so that we can all look at it, we can all discuss it, and we can make sure that people all agree on what it is. Because what inevitably and often happens is people might be agreeing, everyone might be sitting in a meeting agreeing, violently agreeing on, yes, we're all talking the same language, we're all saying the same thing, but if those people to go away and draw what that was, they may be drawing different things, because what we say and what we mean are often different things. So digital transformation in a day, certainly the event, is all around trying to leave with something tangible that we all say, yes, that's what we mean, or even, no, that isn't what we mean, because that's just as important as well. And rather than that process taking 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, it happens in a day. Okay, so what's the outcome of that day? So one, which I've just touched upon, what we try and do is leave you at the end of a day with a clickable demo. Now we say a clickable iPad prototype. We say that specifically because, again, we can hand that around and people can say yes. So that's typically a sort of 5 to 10 page clickable working demo of your digital experience, or an aspect of your digital experience. So maybe we focus on a very specific challenge, maybe a specific feature. It may be that we focus on a particular task that people might want to perform, so that we show that task being completed, and in doing so we touch on lots of other aspects of the digital experience. It needs to be focused, but what it does is it means that, as I said before, you can look at that when we present it back. We can have that debate about whether it's what you thought it would be or not. And actually, we're quite happy, and I think everyone's really happy actually, if people start debating and going, well, that's not what I had in my head, I had something else, because that's what we want. We want to make sure that everyone agrees, that everyone's bought into it. And the only real way we can do that is by making it real. And a clickable demo actually does that. So that means that everyone leaves the day with the same view of what they saw, what happened, and agreed. Even if, as I say, some of that is not necessarily, yeah, that's exactly what we want. It's knowing exactly what we want. So even if the demo hasn't absolutely captured it, well, we provision some time afterwards to make changes, that's fine. But everyone leaves having had that discussion and finishing that discussion, so that people don't just leave, disperse, and then come back and we have to start again. So stakeholder alignment is really, really important.
And it's certainly something, again, emphasised during the day. It's being involved in that day, but as I've said, it's also people understanding that they need to keep involved in the projects. And it could be, again, going back to the comment made earlier, that people, senior managers, chief execs, those are the people who typically take a top-level view of these projects, perhaps might need to understand that they need to take a much more hands-on involved piece around it. Again, that's something that will come out of the day. So you not only have the involvement on the day, and as Paul said, a kind of a complete involvement during that session, but you're left with people understanding what their involvement needs to be to keep momentum and pace going on the project.
And when we've done this, one of the feedbacks we always previously got was, that's great, visually it's appealing and we can transform, we can bring services together and build this new digital service and transform. But then when you go back to the people who actually would have to do the work, your IT, your finance, and your security and risk people, and they said, oh, that can't be done. We can't integrate those two systems. We can't put the data over there, and it's too risky. And you always get these pushbacks. So one of the other things that we also would cover on the day is, having done the why and the what in the design workshop, is also look at the other elements such as the ICT and your security risk appetite and things to try and come up with a early plan of, okay, now you've got a vision of what you want to do, but how would you then practically make that happen? Having looked at your current estate and your current setup, what are the quick wins and how would you start to transition towards that vision? So, what are the practical steps? So that's the early plan, you also get.
And that's why we need the right people in the room, because there's no point doing all this work and then going off and having people challenge it. Let's bring them into that event. Let's have the debate and let's understand why. Because often what we find is when people are saying, oh, that can't be done, it's just, I don't know how that can be done. Not it can't be, but I don't know how. So our job is to facilitate the conversation that works out whether it really can't be done or whether it's just a case of working out how it can be done.
And that will then lead on to a clear way forward. And as most of you said in the poll, the challenges was around, senior stakeholder engagements, skills issues, and hopefully it'll give you a simple, immediate steps that you can take to be able to move your digital transformation quickly at pace.
Okay, so what does it actually look like? The sort of going through and running this process, what would it look like for you and what would it look like from our side? Key, obviously, as we've said, is preparation. So it's the kind of classic analogy of the swan might be gliding gracefully, but the feet are going 10 to the dozen underneath. Preparation is really, really important to have the day flow. A day's not very long. We need to make the most of those sort of 8 or 9 hours that we're in a room together. Preparation is really important. Getting the right stakeholders, agreeing the right scope, knowing what we're going to focus on, not setting ourselves an insurmountable challenge, using almost, what's the Trojan horse challenge that we can use that will be representative of one challenge we can solve that then has a much wider impact. Actually, if we define that little piece of the puzzle, actually the learnings from that can help define the rest of the pieces and put the rest of the puzzle together. Working out what does success look like. So at the end of the day, what do we need to leave with to feel like we've achieved what we wanted during the day, and how are we going to measure that? And then the sort of logistical things, getting the right people into the right place, ideally clearing their diaries so that they're not, going away to answer phones and all that kind of stuff, so that we've got everyone in a room in the right mindset and with a focus for a full day. So on the day, what that looks like is these are sort of typical timings. We reserve the right to sort of shift these around when we know more about the challenge we're looking at. But the first session is really about exploring ideas. So we run a session in the morning where we all understand the challenge. We walk through what are the sort of break that apart, I guess, and look at what are the real problems, and then start to put together some ideas for solutions around it. I would lead part of that to say, what does the user experience look like? So what's the process that they go through? What features, tools would they use? What are the challenges? What information would they need to know at each point in time? Are there any sort of legacy or existing digital tools that we need to draw from in order to make your experience consistent? All of those kind of things, essentially gathering all the information we need then to probably early afternoon, split up, go into groups and start working on maybe what the technical solution might look like, rapid prototyping. We use software that allows us to prototype pretty much real time, allows us to create something that we can then show. It looks like a real website. We can click it, interactions, even animations and that kind of stuff will happen. It looks real, so we have a vision of what this might look like. Behind the scenes, it might only be 5 to 10 pages, but we can show you a clickable prototype. We'd typically then get back together as a group, sort of mid to late afternoon. We'd share what we've all done. We'd again try and break it apart. We would make sure that everyone has had a chance to critique it and say, well, yeah, I thought we were talking about this, not this, that kind of stuff. And then we would typically break around 6 o'clock, at which point the work doesn't stop for us. We will publish what we have so you can view it when you get home and the next day in the office. But we would also then continue working just to update all of the assets that we've created following from the conversation we've had in the afternoon. We have some examples to show. I'm just going to show one very quick example. I'm conscious of time. We did have a video, we tested this yesterday. The video wasn't running well for everyone, so rather than showing a video. We're just going to show you a few sample screenshots here. So here we had, this was an example of a design in a day where we were looking at a major energy supplier supplying boilers. What would it look like if they were able to sell boilers online, which typically is a very difficult thing to do because of the amount of things they need to know about your existing system. That was their real challenge. So we prototyped this, we looked at the challenges that we'd have, and we left at the end of the day with a clickable prototype. It's not right, it's never intended to be right. Developers can't pick it up and make it happen, but what it does is it means they can go back to senior stakeholders and say, here's a vision of what we want to do, and get buy-in for the project and get the budget. I'll skip through this one. This was a Santander project where they were looking at integrating mobile pay on Android. And I'll just very quickly go through this one as well, which is a bank looking at how goal setting might encourage people to invest more and invest with one organisation. These are all debranded, so we can talk about all of these, but you'll see typically these were all clickable. We could hand around the iPad at the end of the day and people could have a look and click and see how it feels. It's tangible, it's exciting. This often is the first time people have actually ever seen anything real that's not written, just words. This is pictures, and obviously people respond very well to that kind of stuff. Okay.
So in terms of the tech modeling on the back of it, so we'll produce a report, and we'll look at your current estate, and then we will look at a couple of suggestions in how you would move your digital transformation project along. And the typical things that we would look at is, ultimately it's about your digital transformation. What are the objectives? So typically be summarized as citizen providing a better service to the citizen. So we would look at some of your service business processes and where we could reimagine them, how you could fundamentally transform across service lines. And then work through what those implications would be for things like, how do you share data securely and things like that. We'd also look at how would we enable you to then build better digital products and services as part of that. And typically one of the pushbacks we also always get is, whether it's from the service teams or from security, is around the risk appetite. So we would help you try and understand, we've run what we call risk workshops with clients where we talk through some of the risks and then try and work out what is the real risk with sharing data with another organization or even with another service team. And when you work through it, it's actually, we used to do it. There's really no risk, or if there's a risk, there are ways we can mitigate it. So we'll cover those in a high level, not in detail. Then we'd look at things like delivery. How would we, if you were then to take this forward, how would you actually implement it? So the typical things we look at is the user research side, the user-centered design, whether it's for the front end, but also the technology choices. How would you sustain it through a delivery project? We'd look at Agile, which is the recommended way of doing things. So how do we, using user-centered design, deliver technology, but deliver it quickly, rapidly, so release features quickly. It's all about the time to value. So how do we prove that a transformation is working quite earlier on rather than go away for 6 months? But and if there's potential, look as on the data science side, how we could use some of the newer capabilities such as artificial intelligence to try and automate some of the products that we're building, and where it's relevant, we could use it. And then fundamentally, in terms of the technology choices that we would make, this is pretty much based on the GDS standards and our work with central government, is we would look at things like cloud and to provide everything as a service. So either you use cloud platforms where applicable, or if you do have in-house systems, how do we start transitioning them to a service model where it's provided as a service and you can evolve it quite rapidly. But key also is the what we call the data backbone, which is all around how do we get simplistically a single view of the citizen, or a better understanding of both your internal stuff, but also your customers and the people you serve, especially with the upcoming general data protection regulation mandates organizations to have better data governance process in place. So we'll look at that. Security, cyber security is key, so that's one of those things. And also look at how we could use Internet of Things and sensors, especially in for local authorities. Some of the ones we're currently talking to are looking at how they can bring smart cities to provide better services. So we look at how we could use Internet of Things and sensors to combine it with your systems and processes to provide a service. And across this piece, we would also try and talk about talent and partnership, which is around how would you sustain this beyond the workshops and the skills you need to bring in. So those are kind of high-level things we would cover, and then we'll write it up into a report with the clickable prototype, which you could hopefully will be useful for you to then move things along.
Okay.
So how do you know you need digital transformation in a day? Or perhaps more generically, how do you need to know if you need to take some action now? Pragmatically, the poll you all, a lot of you mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, the majority of you identified a number of things that were concerns around your current progress. Could be stakeholder engagement, pace of change, those sorts of things. If you've identified something like that, again, stating probably the obvious, the time to act on that is now. Think about a kind of a reset. Our view would be a piece of work such as digital transformation a day, facilitated is a good way to reset and restart. So it could be a new program. If you're doing a new program, then the sort of outline service we're talking about can help you get off the ground at a faster pace, set a direction, a top level direction where you're going, and get the stakeholder buy-in. So if you're starting off, it's a good way of starting off at pace, at least having the next step so you can maintain that pace. If you're in a project or program where the speed at the moment is not what you'd hope it to be, as said, probably the thing to do at this stage would be to think about a kind of a reset of expectations, bring people together and use a session like this to make sure all the stakeholders are engaged, make sure people are sharing the same vision, make sure you've got a clear view of the blockers, and not necessarily in all the detail, but at least you know where to go to look further and solve them so that you can start to move at pace again. So where you need it, basically, if you're seeing a blocker at the moment, be it people, tech, or whatever, using a tool like this to reset and restart and fundamentally start to build some pace in your piece of work, we think is a good way of doing it. And it could be facilitated by us, obviously we'd love that, but you could do it internally, bring another supplier. I mean, the benefit of bringing in a third party is they have that ability to be abstracted out of your organisation, which gives a kind of a power in terms of facilitating and driving and not necessarily having the historical side to slow them down. So you get a new set of thinking. So how do you know you need it? If you're not satisfied with the pace you're moving at the moment, then our view would be you probably need it. So the sales thing, if you are interested in discussing it further, do get in touch. We've got a thing where you can book consultations online. What we would do is, in the first instance, understand where you are, what you're trying to achieve. And frankly, if what you're trying to do and where you are in that program doesn't fit what we think we could help you with, we'd say that. We wouldn't want to sort of lead you down a garden path. But if there is something where we feel this sort of program could work, then obviously we'd have an initial discussion with you, get a view of what you're doing, understand the scope, understand what you hope to achieve, and then we could piece together a program around that. We have a sort of a base level service, which covers what Paul, as particularly in Anger, have talked about, and also we can tailor that around particular requirements as required. But again, if you'd like to discuss that, we can set up a call, a meeting, whatever, and have a chat with you about what we could do and help you.
Okay, so if you've got any questions, keep them coming in. We have some questions that have come in already, so if you, having seen everything, have any particular questions, say we'll try and get through as many as we can. We are going to finish dead on 10:30. Appreciate everyone's got busy schedules. So fire them across now. We'll just have a quick recap on what we've discussed, and then we'll go into a Q&A session to finish.
Okay. Summary on the service. with digital transformation a day, what we would do is we would have an initial discussion with you to understand where you are with your digital program. Could be of any size, could be an organisational change program, could be a particular service. We'll understand where you are, and then we will do some preparation so that we can come in for a day. It could in theory be longer, as I mentioned, we can tailor it, so in certain instances it may end up being a day and a half or something slightly longer, but on a day basis we would then come in, optimise that time. As Paul has said, you end up with a very visual piece of work at the end of the day, which can help get that kind of shared buy-in from all people in your business, get top-level understanding what the blockers are, so you know what actions to take. Some of the blockers may require further work to be done by internally or different supply you've already got, but you have those identified and you know the risks of those blockers. Most importantly, I think, create that shared sense of purpose. If you're in an existing project, re-emphasise it. And again, something we talked about a lot is really have clarity of what your next steps need to be. So you're left with what we hope is a way of accelerating your steps forward from this day, and then build momentum.
Okay, so we have a question. Emma would like to know, how do you deal with design issues in a day when you're looking at complex technology, e.g. local gov legacy, applications and integrations?
Okay. So from that perspective, I guess design, there's two parts to this. I can talk to the user experience design. I think some of that we would want to really understand what the lay of the land is in the preparation for the project, so that we're really clear on what you have and you know what's possible from an end user perspective. It really depends on the project. I mean, as always, the answer is it depends. There are always constraints. There's always complexities. We are always discovering how complex some legacy systems are. When we're designing the user interface, we can take two approaches. One is we can say, right, knowing the constraints of your technology, let's work within those constraints and let's make sure that we can come up with the best user experience possible within those constraints. That's absolutely fine. What often happens is when we meet with clients, as we get talking through it, they want more than that. They want to say, actually, we want to aim higher than that, and we want to use the user experience design to help get buy-in for transformation to address some of these complex technology issues. So often we'll say, well, let's unlock some of those. Let's not be constrained by them when we're doing the design, and let's design what we think is the ideal user experience. And let's use that to share, get everyone to agree. And that's what we would call, I guess, a vision prototype of how things could work. What's good on that is that's essentially then the hook to hang on all of the, I guess, barriers, technological barriers, to say, well, why couldn't we achieve this with what we have at the moment? And that's real digital transformation. Now, it may be that some of those challenges can't be overcome in the short term, but what it does is it gives you your guiding star, a user experience that everyone gets buy into, and you can work back from that. So maybe it's not a linear line from where you are today to get to that vision of what a user experience should be. It might be you have to get there via a different route. But what it does mean is that when you're then incrementally getting towards that ideal user experience, you know where ultimately you want to get to, because you have described that vision in something very, very tangible.
In terms of the legacy technology, what we find is obviously once you got the senior stakeholders in and you can articulate that vision, that in itself will give you effectively a business case to start making those changes. But in terms of the quick wins, what we've practically done is by being able to integrate into some of those legacy applications to effectively extract the data and to build a service around that data and make sure that we put the data back in. So which also then brings into you start collating, centralizing the data out of the systems, and that will enable you to do some of the transformation quickly, but then over time start looking at some of your the technology challenges over a much longer period. But so to travel at different paces on how you do some of the transformation and then the technology changes.
Okay.
Did you have any more questions?
Okay, so we've got some more questions here. Sorry, we're just looking at them now to see which ones we answer first.
Question was, how much information do we, to do the event, how much information do we need about the IT infrastructure prior to the workshop? Realistically, as much as possible. We'd appreciate that typically some information, some won't. We'd certainly want a top-level view of what systems you're using today, any work you've already done in terms of their dependencies, your data management. One thing we have found is that GDPR in a lot of organisations is helping to drive greater visibility of data. So, for example, if you've done work already around GDPR and understanding where your data sits, which I'm sure most of you probably have, that's actually a very useful input into our programme of work. So, as much as you've got, frankly, and we'd make sure that we get enough to really drive the value on the day.
Okay. The next question.
There's a question, is it useful to have third-party suppliers in the room on the day, suppliers of the technology and app, or better to make it business user-focused to have the solution unconstrained?
I think the answer there, you're going to hate me for this, but it depends. It depends on the situation and the challenge you have and how transformational you want to make the day. So we do see typically two types of event that we run. One is focusing on a particularly knotty problem. I mentioned earlier on about it's normally the Trojan horse for this is a sort of a good example of something that it might be quite small but actually is quite complex and quite difficult. In which case, if the purpose of the event is to try and get you beyond that problem, then absolutely we would want third-party suppliers of the technology and apps in on the day, because the brief for that and the measure of success would be, have we solved that problem? Can we now go and act on that? Can we unblock whatever was the blocker to realizing what you want in the first place? The other type that we run is very much high level. It's more of a vision. Now, that's usually where we agree up front that we won't be constrained by many of the things that will just drag us back down again, that we do need to look at this from a high level perspective. Now, that's not necessarily going to result in us focusing on something that's quite woolly and quite broad. We will still push in the design of the event to make sure that the problem or the sort of narrative or theme of what we're looking at means that we can be very focused and create a prototype that demonstrates the solution, but that then gives us a vision somehow of how your digital services may look in the future. That tends to not require third-party consultants in a room, because we don't have those constraints. We want to look at that problem with a fresh perspective, and that's what we'll bring. We will challenge and assume that there aren't any more barriers there.
Another question. Have you done events where you did real user research as part of the prep? So interviewing public users of current products to get their feedback on the current user experience, and afterwards get them to test the prototype. If you've done that, were there any interesting results?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've run user research as part of this. So as part of the prep, we will look at whether there is some research that we can do prior to the event. What we found actually, and we do user research all the time, it's part of our methodology, and we push for that where we could, but where it's going to be valuable to do that. What we found, I can't go into the specifics of the that particular research. But on a higher level, if we do any kind of customer research before the event and start the day with that customer research, that is a really good place to get a good way of getting people into the same place. You know, we can talk about the process as much as we like, but actually seeing real users using real services at the moment, often highlighting some of the issues that mean we're all in that room to try and transform in a day, gets people in the right mindset in seconds. We did something recently with a local authority where the video that we created, that we started the event with, is very frustrating. It's not nice to watch, but it's reality, and it gets everyone, you know, it tends to make people, you know, leave all of their assumptions at the door because they're seeing someone really, really struggling to complete a task online that should be easy. And yeah, you know, as I said, it takes what we could probably take 30 minutes to describe, and in 1 minute everyone's on board and everyone's energized, and everyone says, we've got to sort this out. And when we say to people, right, well, in 8 hours we'll have the solution, they don't believe us, but by the end of the day, people leave with a smile on their face and really energized. Okay. So we've got some more questions come in, but as we promised, we're going to finish at 10:30. So what we'll do is any additional questions come in, we'll try and answer those after the session. We'll try and message the people directly who've asked those questions.
We are recording the webinar, so I think we will be sharing the webinar of all of you and people who weren't able to attend today. And obviously, as I said, if you're interested in talking to us further about it, even if it's just an exploratory discussion, do get in touch. Very happy to have a quick phone call, run through what you're doing and see if what we can offer can help at all. And do look out for other things from us. We will be running a number of these events during the year on different topics. One of the things close to my heart at the moment is process automation and how that can help public sector organisations just move faster internally. A lot of people talk about external digitalisation of services. One of the big things we see a lot of our clients is the need just to actually digitalise internally, speed up flows, speed up data integrations and that kind of stuff. So look out for more of us on that. But I hope it's been useful.
Yeah, I think
we also have a survey. So when we do end the webinar, the survey will come up automatically. So we do appreciate keeping feedback.
Yeah, I think all I would say to conclude is this is a methodology we use. It's not right for everything, but if you want to discuss whether this is a model that would work for you, get in touch. You know, we are very honest about it because we don't want to run one of these events if it's not going to absolutely deliver the results that you want. We can very quickly, if you tell us what your problem is, we can very quickly say to you, yes, this would work for that problem or not. So, you know, at minimum, what you'll get is our view on the best way to approach your challenge. And if digital transformation is right for you, based on the ones that we've run for the clients so far, it's a very rewarding process. It's hard work. You know, it's tough. It feels like a lot longer than 8 or 9 hours, I can promise you. But actually, when you see the kind of results that you get and you see how much it accelerates the project that you have and unblocks a lot of things, it's very, very worthwhile.
We're done.
Great.
So thank you all for attending. Hopefully it's been giving you some insights. Hopefully it's given you a view in terms of where we might be able to help. And hopefully in due course we'll be this week again. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks for attending.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.